everyone, Tuni here from Potential Sonology. In this video, I'm going to share my perspective as a beginner on a backpack pattern. This is my first real backpack pattern. I know that I've done a video on the Guardian mini backpack pattern by Lynn's Handmade. However, I consider that pattern, it's a mini backpack. A little bit about me again. Well, I love backpacks. I think they're very convenient. They carry a lot of stuff and I like to carry a lot of stuff. So I carry a backpack to work every day. And I had wanted to make my own backpack for a while, for over a year actually, but I just been looking at different patterns. I bought a few and I watched the tutorials and I just I couldn't decide which pattern to start with. This week I had some time, so I decided to pick one. Anyway, the backpack that I decided to make this week and the backpack pattern that I'm going to share my perspective on is, of course, ta-da-da! Please say hello to my new backpack, the Trailblazer Convertible Backpack, and this pattern is by Bagstock Designs. Before I talk about why I picked this pattern and the features and everything else, I'm going to put it on. So, on the back, it has backpack straps that are adjustable and detachable. And you put it on. I really like it. So, hopefully you can see the size of it. It's not a small backpack, but it's a good size. Another thing that's cool about this backpack is that it's convertible, right? So in addition to being a backpack, as you can see on the back, you can detach the straps and you can turn this into a shoulder bag, which I will show you. So you use one of the backpack straps and you just clip it on like this. And now you have a shoulder bag. And I'll show you with it on. You can see right here. I feel like it's a little bit big for a shoulder bag. I mean, it depends on your preference, I guess. I mean, it works, but it's a big bag. I think most of the time I'll just keep it as a backpack, but this is an option if you prefer a shoulder bag. You can turn this into a crossbody bag. You just need to make another strap because this one is probably not going to be long enough to go over your shoulder. Yeah, so you might need to make another one that's a little bit longer as a shoulder, as a crossbody strap for this one, but it will work. I really like that you can do a lot with this pattern. You can, if you are a beginner, like a beginner, and you want to make something like this, but you are overwhelmed by all the little pockets, little compartments that come, and it has a lot of pockets, you can just omit the pockets. You can use one pocket, you can use two, you can pick if you want to have a pocket like this on the front and on the back, or vice versa. And on the back here, I opted for a trolley sleeve. So you could put this back through the handle of your suitcase. But you can also stitch the bottom here and then turn this into a slip pocket as well. So there's just so many possibilities with this backpack. I've looked at different patterns, and most backpacks have like the top, and a lot of these backpacks, the way they're constructed is that you assemble the lining separately. Well, they're not completely separate. They're kind of like you attach your exterior and then you attach the lining pieces and then you turn the bag right sides out. And I've done that before. It was hard work and it was not fun. And right now, when I make a bag like that, I prefer to use binding instead of turning the bag right sides out. That's what put me off from making one of those backpacks. With this pattern, however, if you look at it, it's very similar to a tote bag. See the top here? It doesn't have that shape like a gusset, So I really like that. It makes making the bag a lot easier. That's what I like about this backpack, because even though it's a backpack, well, it's not air quote backpack, it's a backpack. The way it's constructed is very similar to the way a tote bag is constructed. You know, when you make you assemble your exterior and then you assemble your lining, and then you put the exterior inside, lining outside, and then you stitch the top, turn your right sides out, and then close the gap. So in my opinion, that's a lot more simple than making a backpack in a traditional way, I would say. Plus the design is just so cool and so unique, and I love it so much. There are many other reasons why I like this backpack, but one more that I would like to add is that when you make a backpack, sometimes you need to acquire additional hardware. For example, some patterns suggest you add buckles or like plastic connectors, you know, those that are traditional to store-bought backpacks. However, with this backpack, even though you need loads of hardware, if you made bags before, you probably have most of that hardware in your inventory, like D-rings, or if you use rivets, you don't need to use rivets. But yeah, you have D-rings, you need a lot of D-rings, you need zippers. You can add purse feet if you want to. These are optional. And then for the straps, you need swivel hooks and what are these called? Sliders. Yeah. So if you made bags before, you probably have these already. You need quite a few of them, but these are all you need. Like, you don't need to go and buy new types of hardware to make this backpack, which I think is kind of nice. All right, so those are some of the reasons why I like this backpack. Next, I am going to share some features of the backpack, and I'm going to show you the main panels of the backpack before they were sewn together into one piece so that it's easier for you to see. I will also mention some adjustments that I made in terms of material or design, things like that. That will be in the next section. And then before I leave you, I'm going to share some points of consideration if you would like to try this backpack pattern as your third backpack pattern. Okie doke, let's get to it. All right, everyone, I thought I should show you my main panels before I assemble them so it's easier for you to see. Let's start with the front exterior panel. The first modification that I made to this panel is that I used cotton webbing. This is 1-inch cotton webbing instead of making my own straps. The pattern instructions do walk you through how to make your own straps with fabric. However, if you would like to use webbing, that's fine too, and that's what I used here. In terms of fabric choices, I used wax canvas as my exterior main fabric, and that's the red one. And I used just quilting cotton with woven interfacing as my contrasting fabric. I like wax canvas for this project because it gives the bag some structure without being too bulky. Like, it's a little bit thinner than vinyl, and it's not difficult to sew. It's supposed to be water resistant as well, which is great for a backpack. And finally, I just like the cool look of it. For my contrasting fabric, once again, I used this super cute print with sewing notions. I had 1 yard of this fabric because it was so expensive, but it was enough for this project, so I decided to use it. I'll talk more about my lining fabric choice when we get to the lining pieces, but I'm using Oxford nylon. That's the navy fabric that you see on the screen. I like to use Oxford nylon for bag lining because I don't need to interface it and it's easy to clean. For my magnetic snaps, I use my rivet press to install the magnetic snaps, and I made a mistake on my first one, so it came out a little bit wonky. It has a little dent, but it's still magnetic, so it works. So that's something to keep in mind if you're using a rivet press. Just be careful with that. For the flap pocket, I used my lining fabric on the inside, that's the Oxford nylon, and I used a number 5 zipper for this pocket. For the foam interfacing, I used by Annie, soft and stable. This is a sew-in interfacing, and I recommend it over fusible foam interfacing. I think the quality is better. Next, we're going to move on to the exterior back panel. For the exterior back panel, once again, I use cotton webbing for my strap. And I wanted to point out that I also use a whole bunch of rivets. You don't need to. I used number 8 rivets here. For my D-ring tabs, I use waterproof canvas. I had some scraps of this waterproof canvas, so I decided to use it. I did not stabilize my tabs with anything. I think they are very sturdy as they are, and they do not need to be stabilized. Also, I like waterproof canvas because they're sturdy, but they're not bulky. Okay, I mentioned before that I decided to use this panel as a trolley sleeve instead of adding another slip pocket, so I didn't sew the bottom part of that pocket. So please know that that's an option. For this zipper pocket, I used a number 3 zipper. I used zipper by the yard. I cut it a little bit longer than the pattern required, and for the lining fabric, I just used quilting cotton. I didn't interface it with anything, but you can if you want to. And that's it for the exterior back panel. We're going to move on to the lining panels. Here are my 2 lining panels for the front and the back. The left is the front one. The pattern suggests you add a slip pocket using quilting cotton. However, I like the look and the elasticity of mesh, so I decided to use mesh instead. When I cut the mesh for this panel, I kept the width the same, but I cut 7 inches for the height instead of the original height in the pattern. And I divided my panel into 2 pockets. I used a smaller rivet to secure the top of the stitched line that divides the pockets. And I forgot to mention that I covered the raw edge at the top with store-bought bias binding. Moving on to the lining back panel. The pattern comes with 1 zipper pocket, and this is the pocket where you would turn your bag right sides out at the end. I used Oxford nylon for all of my lining pieces here, and I used a number 3 zipper. I also decided to add another mesh slip pocket on the back panel, and this is mainly for my electronic device because I always have either my iPad or my laptop in my backpack. I cut the mesh the same width as the main panel, and the height is 11 inches. Now let's talk about the Oxford nylon fabric for a second. I use this fabric for my lining pieces and some on the exterior as well, and you can see there's the shiny side and the matte side. I don't really know which side is the right side, so I guess you could use either. I think this fabric is great for lining because you don't have to interface it. It's sturdy, it's not see-through, at the same time it's not stiff. It is a little bit slippery, so just test it on your machine if you choose to use it. I was able to use my regular presser feet for this fabric, and I just kept my regular stitch length. Alright, hope that helped. We're going to move on to the side panels. These are my exterior side panels. And first of all, I did not use waterproof canvas for the tabs on the side panels. I just happened to have some wax canvas left, so I just used it instead. And I did not stabilize them with anything. Now, for the side pockets. I used mesh again, but for the top, I used fold over elastic because I thought that it would help keep my water bottle from falling out of my bag. You can just use the pattern piece for the side pocket to cut out the mesh pockets. And I used by Annie Soft and Stable as my foam interfacing for the side panels as well. The last panel that I will talk about in this video is my bottom exterior panel, and I used waterproof canvas for this one instead of my main fabric, which is wax canvas. I just had a scrap and I thought it would be nice to have this sturdy fabric on the bottom. And I also added purse feet just for fun, really. You can't see on the screen, but I use Peltex as my stabilizer. it didn't stick to the waterproof canvas. So I had to use some double-sided tape to attach the stabilizer to the waterproof canvas. Last thing I want to point out is actually my foam on this bottom piece. I used scraps of foam interfacing that I had in my drawer, and I just stitched them together using a zigzag stitch. So if you have scraps of foam interfacing lying around in your sewing room, you can stitch them together and use them for this part of the bag. In addition to these adjustments, I also changed the straps a little bit. As you can see, I didn't make my own straps. I used cotton webbing, and this is 1.5 inch wide webbing. The pattern suggests you make your straps 1 inch wide. However, as I mentioned before, I carry a lot of stuff in my backpack, so I thought I would use wider webbing to make it more sturdy. The last part of this video will be my personal opinions on what points to consider if you're going to make this bag as a beginner. I'm going to divide this part into 3 sections. So first, we're going to start with equipment. Good quality equipment is crucial to sewing, just like any other hobby or activity. For this pattern, for a bag that's this size or this thick with this many layers especially, use the correct needle sizes. This is important to me, especially because when I started sewing, I thought, okay, I would just use 80-12 needles for everything, because that should be enough, right? Because I didn't sew leather, I didn't sew vinyl, so I didn't need those big needles. But I was wrong. And what I learned is that using the right needle makes such a huge difference in your sewing, in the quality of your stitches. Also, it makes your sewing journey a little bit more smooth as well, because your machine is not struggling as much. For this project, I started with an 80-12 universal needle when I was sewing like 2 layers of cotton together, and when it got a little bit more bulky, I moved on to 90-14, and finally I ended up with 116. The next piece of equipment that I recommend on any sewing project, especially when you are sewing uneven layers of fabric, and that piece of equipment is a hem jumper or a jig. Okay, I don't even know what it's called, but basically your presser foot works well when it stays like this. When you have different layers of fabric, sometimes your presser foot will tilt up or tilt down like this, and that's when you get skip stitches, or that's when it struggles to feed your fabric. One way to prevent that problem is to use a hem jumper to make your presser foot leveled. It's an inexpensive piece of equipment. Also, you can just use something that you already have, like you can use cardboard, you can fold fabric, so do whatever you need to make sure that your presser foot is flat as you're sewing and not tilted, and that will really help prevent skip stitches. So we talked about sewing equipment. Now we're going to move on to sewing techniques or strategies or whatever you want to call them. The first point that I want to share is your stitch length. And again, sharing from my own experiences. When I started sewing, I thought, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter what I sew, my stitch length would be 2.5 millimeters. Or sometimes I would go up to 3, but I was so afraid to go beyond 3 because I was afraid that it would be too long, the stitch length would be too long. And I noticed that when I sewed like thicker fabric, I ended up with like little tiny teeny stitches, and I got skip stitches, all sorts of problems. And sometimes when you watch a tutorial video from a more experienced sewist, they don't tell you these little things because it's kind of assumed knowledge, but I just wanted to point that out because, you know, as a beginner, I experienced this problem, and I fixed it, so I hope that this helps you as well. Anyway, for this project or any project, it really depends on your needle size and the thickness of your fabric. Those are going to determine your stitch length. Okay, so if you sew quilt and cotton together, you can go from 2 to 2.5. That would be my recommended stitch length. But like me, if I use wax canvas, I usually start with 3 millimeters. And with top stitching, I can go up to 4 or 4.5 if I have like that many layers of fabric. I don't want to get technical because I really don't know much about this. However, using the right stitch length will prevent skip stitches, and your machine will also feed your layers of fabric through much more easily. So keep that in mind. Don't stick with one stitch length for everything. Different parts of the bag require different stitch lengths. Another very simple technique that I find very helpful is that when assembling the panels, so when you make the bag three-dimensional, when you put the front, back, sides, bottom together, these are going to be your high stress areas because it's a backpack, right? So when you carry heavy stuff, you know, it's like it might burst at the seams. So you don't want that. So one very easy way to eliminate that problem is, so when, for example, when you stitch the front or the bag to the sides, you're going to stitch the first line at the seam allowance that the pattern suggests. And then once you're done with your first line, you're going to go back and stitch another line within that seam allowance, maybe like a tiny teeny bit like to the right of that seam allowance. And that will help prevent your seams from bursting. And I did this for all of my like final assembly seams from the sides and also the bottom. This will also help, like if you didn't sew straight the first time, you can go back and just sew another line and just kind of keep your seam straight without having to unpick your seam. Another thing that I want to mention is that the pattern instructions suggest you turn this bag right sides out from the slip pocket on the inside. Let me show you. From this pocket, you turn the bag right sides out. As you can see, the slip pocket is not huge. If you use thicker material like I did with wax canvas, or use vinyl, or even, you know, with quilt and cotton, sometimes you might struggle a little bit to turn it right sides out at the end. So a technique that I learned, this is from Keziah, from SiahSwag. You probably know her, she's very famous. Yeah, she suggested that you leave one side of your lining bottom open. So you sew a little bit from one corner, sew a little bit, and then leave a gap, and then sew a little bit at the other corner. And then you turn the bag right sides out from the hole at the bottom instead of from the zipper pocket. I will link to her video in the description box. She explains this really well. I don't think she has timestamps, so you might have to find where that is. I will try to find the time and then just put it in the description box for you. And what's cool about that is that the final product looks the same. It's just that there's a little bit of trick going into this, and it made turning the bag right sides out a lot more simple for me, which I really appreciated. Full disclaimer, none of these techniques are my own. I learned these from other people, but these are the techniques that I don't find, you know, experts explain very much. And I know that when you're a beginner and you wanna challenge yourself, but maybe you need a little bit of hand holding, having these tips would be helpful. All right, so we talked about equipment, we talked about techniques, and the last but not least element that I would like to share that would make this project a success for you is, of course, your mindset. First of all, even for more experienced bag makers, I think this bag takes longer to make than many other bags. And it's simply because it has more pieces. So more pieces to cut, more pieces to interface if you need to interface your fabric. And it's got pockets, just pockets everywhere. So assembling the panels takes time. It took me 2 days to make this backpack, and I think I spent about maybe 5 or 6 hours per day. The first day was just cutting and assembling just the front, and then the second day was everything else. And I watched multiple tutorials along the way to just make sure I was doing it right. I would like you to approach this project as a practice project, because even though it might be challenging because you've never done it before, most of these pieces are rectangles, and the way the backpack is constructed is just straight lines, and it's very, very straightforward. It just has a lot of pieces for you to assemble. That's all. So you can really make this backpack amazing first try if you take your time. I would say stupid mistakes usually occur when you're already tired, but you just want to push through it. And from experience, that's never a good idea. So take your time. You can plan your week to finish this project or whatever you need to do, but take your time. And if it doesn't turn out perfect, think of it as a trial run, because the next time you make this backpack, it's going to be even better than this time, because you already know how it's constructed. You already know what mistakes to avoid. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of positivity and a lot of growth that this backpack pattern can offer you. So don't get frustrated because you're in a rush to finish the bag, or don't get frustrated because the later steps get a little challenging. This is a wonderful backpack to make for yourself. It has a unique look. People will ask you where you got this backpack, and you can tell them that you made it. In conclusion, I highly recommend the Trailblazer Convertible Backpack pattern by Bagstock Designs to y'all beginner, amateur bag makers out there, or sewists in general. It's a great pattern to make. It's highly functional, highly adjustable, customizable, and you can have a lot of fun with this backpack. So I hope you give it a try. Let me know how it goes for you. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye!